Dear viewers and listeners, I salute you all. Thank you for your time. My name is Nathan from Finlina Management Consultants, the main sponsors of this program known as Entrepreneurship and Sustainable Development. Our focus is mainly on Africa. It gives me great pleasure when I get the opportunity of explaining this program of entrepreneurship and sustainable development in Africa. The aim of this program is to create and promote an entrepreneurship culture in Africa. This is one of the series of free lectures with the aim of creating and promoting an unprecedented entrepreneurship culture in our communities in Africa. This program is ongoing and needs support of all forms in order to ignite and maintain the entrepreneurship banner in the whole African continent right from childhood. Your participation is highly welcome. It could be through lectures, comments about the views on what must be included in our future lectures, plays, comedies, presentations, financial assistance, subscribing to this channel, and so on. The objective of this particular presentation is to emphasize the risks bedeviling Africa in the implementation of the Sustainable Development Goals agenda, and also to communicate my views as to how risks in entrepreneurship and sustainable development should be addressed. First, let me briefly explain about the Sustainable Development Goals agenda, which I'm going to regard as the SDG agenda. It consists of three main pillars: alleviating poverty and hunger, establishing and maintaining peace and justice, plus effective stewardship of nature. The conditions prevailing in Africa, which should be addressed to mitigate risks in ESD, were imposed on us directly or indirectly in the colonial era. They led to Africa being divided into various ethnic groups. They became a norm. They fragmented our strengths. They crippled our economies. They weakened our abilities to be creative and innovative, which finally ended up into the conflicts that we are currently experiencing in our beloved continent on a daily basis. This must stop and has to be resolved or reversed. How do you go about this situation? These are my views, and probably the views of many that have spoken about Africa. We need to have the following implemented as a matter of urgency before we find ourselves being recolonized. The whole world is looking at us, especially the West, to utilize any loopholes available to disrupt our efforts towards unity as a continent. Even those investors that are coming to invest in Africa could be having a hidden agenda, but we don't know. Based on what is currently happening and what has happened before, we have to be very careful. We must continue to silence the gun. We must strengthen our trade through a common African market. We must collapse the inter-country borders and form one country. We must have a single currency. We must have a unifying African language. We must have a fully operational and supportive African bank. And most important, we must embrace the spirit of Ubuntu as a means of strengthening our African culture. How are we gonna continuing to silence the gun, and what are the benefits? We need to resolve conflicts without the use of the gun to confront each other. Examples: what is happening in Democratic Republic of Congo, Somalia, Burkina Faso, Mali, conflict everywhere. But in many of the cases, those conflicts are resolved using the gun, which we need to stop. Life is very important and must be protected at all costs. Infrastructure being destroyed means bringing the continent backward. We should treat use of the gun as a barbaric and backward approach and resort to round-table negotiations.
Having pacified the country, now the UPDF exports peace in other countries. We were in Liberia at one time. We are now in Somalia. We have been to South Sudan. We have been to Central African Republic. With our brothers in the DRC, we have been there many times. We are there now on the other side of Eastern DRC, fighting the terrorists, the ADF terrorists. And that side we are doing very, very well. You should know that we are doing very well in Eastern DRC. Our objectives there are being fulfilled.
General Mahanga stated that the East African Community Regional Force is not mandated to go on the offensive, but rather to ensure the implementation of the decision of the East African Community Heads of State on peace in Eastern DRC.
This force that is being assembled here, the East African Community Regional Force, is coming in here on a different mission. The peacekeeping mission here, their mission is to witness the process of peace, of achieving peace in Eastern DRC.
According to Colonel Walaka, the current UPDF mission in the DRC under Operation Shuja has largely succeeded because the UPDF has a strategic relationship with the residents. The resident district commissioner noted that Chisoro district has had challenges since 28 March 2022 when the DRC government and the M23 rebels got involved in war.
There was a booming export trade here. Guest of honor here on daily basis, we are almost carrying 80 traders going to Goma. This place you have seen today, it had very many youth and women who are on daily basis crossing to Congo, sell a few items, and then bring back items. We were enjoying peace with our neighbors, and that was the Wanagana before 28th of March last year.
We shall utilize comparative and competitive advantages in conducting our businesses. Collapsing the inter-country borders and forming one country will be having the following benefits: prevent foreign invasion or aggression. For instance, what happened in many countries in Africa, especially in Libya, Egypt, DRC, and many other countries. Most of the conflicts in Africa are caused by external powers.
So, I mean, that is the land of unconfirmed rape.
Yes, we came, we saw, he died.
That was former U.S. Secretary of State Hillary Clinton's reaction following the capture and brutal murder of Libyan President Muammar Gaddafi. According to some, the invasion of Libya was about protecting civilians. Others said it was about Libya's vast oil reserves. But everyone was convinced that it was all about currency, specifically Gaddafi's plan to introduce the gold dinar, a single African currency made from gold that would eventually replace the US dollar when trading with Africa. Many scholars have said that it's the kind of thing that one has to plan almost in secret and launch it when ready, because as soon as you say it, you'll have a bullseye on your back. You see, the world relies on the US dollar, giving America unparalleled economic dominance. Nearly 90% of all international currency transactions are in dollars. 60% of foreign exchange reserves are held in dollars, and almost 40% of the world's debt is issued in US dollars. This gives the United States extraordinary power over nearly anyone who imports or exports anything, anywhere. Hillary Clinton's victory lap was explained as mission accomplished for the US NATO intervention following reports of mass atrocities under Gaddafi's regime. It was later revealed that President Obama himself had asked his advisors to draw up options including a new military front in Libya, and the Defense Department was reportedly standing ready with the full spectrum of ground military operations required. Unless you plead temporary insanity, you have to recognize the double standards. There were several other parts of the region in the Middle East and North Africa which pretty much needed humanitarian support, but which the West either ignored or didn't really pay the same amount of attention to. And so the world watched as Western armies pummeled Libya with bombs with the pretext of humanitarian intervention. But the 2016 publication of Clinton's emails revealed another agenda behind the Libyan war, one which it seems was achieved: prevention of the demise of the American buck, as well as prevention of the creation of the independent hard currency in Africa that would have freed the continent from its economic bondage, an outstanding rival to the dollar and the euro, and put an end to the exploitative French-African franc.
How do we strengthen our trade through a common African market? And what are the benefits? We shall have stronger bargaining power, especially on matters that require utilizing economies of scale.
Critically, in the last 2-3 years, we've made a decision on this continent that can transform the economic fortunes of our continent, and that is the creation of the African Continental Free Trade Area, which is now going to be the main vehicle for trading amongst ourselves. That has been one of the major structural problems that the continent has had, that unlike in other parts of the areas of the world where a lot of economic activities inwardly directed, 70-75% of the GDP of the European Union comes from intra-European trade. Our figures were different. But with the existence of the African Continental Free Trade Area, we now have an opportunity to break that structural obstacle. And I believe that in that, we have potentially a major game changer for the development of the continent. As far as I'm concerned, our message is the smart money is in Africa. Take advantage of that.
Having a single currency will ease trade, will make doing business cheaper because of the exchange transaction costs which are going to be eliminated. There will be limited chances of illegitimate money because of the controls that will be in place to ensure that such things do not happen. The currency will be pegged on the resources that we have as a continent. There will be no inconveniences in money exchange. What about having a unifying African language? This enables us to do business better, to work together. No need for translation. There will be some element of African privacy in doing business which will be enhanced and is very important as well. The African cultural values will be strengthened. Mutual respect, irrespective of ethnic group, will be improved. Superiority complex based on language will be completely eliminated. More effective communication will be taking place because we shall be using one unifying African language. Having a fully operational and supportive African bank will assist in the following regard. There will be lower African transaction costs. Ownership and control will be by African countries. Management will be by Africans. Funding of projects will be based on the priorities that Africa has earmarked, and therefore it will enhance the spirit of working together, growing together, developing together, and also having shared prosperity. And lastly, embracing the spirit of Ubuntu as a means of strengthening our African culture. will lead to loving one another, care for one another, stop greed, and share what we have, which will also lead to shared growth, shared development, and shared prosperity. Let us also look at the areas of risk in general from a country's point of view. These ones are going to be categorized under leadership, trust and transparency, preparedness, political apathy, army and police interventions, financial risks, and a few others. Leadership is very important in whatever we are doing because without leadership, nothing can really go on. We have seen many countries in Africa, because of failed leadership, because of weak leadership, they are not able to develop, they are not able to grow economically, and as a result, there is economic stagnation. Without leadership, there will be mismanagement of resources, and this means avoid indulging in corruption activities, avoid bribery. Lack or weakness of the legal muscle contributes a lot in terms of leadership. And these ones also reduce, by having good leadership, the risk becomes more reduced. Trust and transparency in handling resources, integrity, independence, transparency, and full information to be communicated amongst the stakeholders, making sure that all the actions and omissions are fully communicated. In some countries, we have experienced some level of unpreparedness, whereby there is scramble for resources, there is unwillingness to take lead. We have the problem of the debt crisis, foreign exchange risk, forward exchange rates, and many others. Then, in many cases, we see political apathy, where in most of the countries, voting is not taken seriously. Youth are not involved. If they're involved, their involvement is very low. Women's involvement is still very low. These are areas that need more involvement. Army and police interventions. In many of our countries, you realize that the army or the police are not rewarded handsomely, or the reward mechanism that is being used to remunerate or to pay them for the work they have done is not motivating enough to make them work very hard to combat crime. These are some of the country issues that affect the unity into one continent. Appointment or election of the cabinet for the continent, who is going to be president, who are going to be the ministers, who are going to be the members of parliament, and things in that direction. Effectiveness of the legal systems in various neighboring countries and how they should be addressed. Extent of economic ties that each country has with the non-African countries. For instance, the economic ties that a particular country may be having with the Western or Chinese or European influences. Fear of the unknown. Uniting as a continent was there before. We just need to reunite, so we should not fear the unknown. The unknown will find us as you go along. Because among the unknowns, we have funding opportunities that we may forfeit, aid, capital development of the continent, and a few others. But the moment we start, the better, because there will always be something to lose whenever you are going to gain something better. Then, of course, the cultural differences. But our cultures as Africa don't differ so much, and therefore it is not difficult to homogenize our cultural differences. lastly, division of responsibilities at continental, bloc, or country level. They need to be clearly defined. This is an appeal to African leaders. Stop procrastinating. Otherwise, one of us will be in the next country to be invaded. Don't wait any longer for the situation to get better. Just dive in. The situation will improve as you go along. It is time to appoint or elect the interim African cabinet. It's long overdue. We need to know where the capital city of Africa will be. We need to know the infrastructure along which we are going to be operating. And it doesn't have to be necessarily the largest city or the most convenient place, but we need to have a start and we need to be clear about our direction. In conclusion, this lecture has highlighted the main sources of the problems that make our continent have a high risk appetite in terms of performing entrepreneurial activities to make sustainable development a reality. As a united Africa, it is our duty to make sure that attempts are made to address all these obstacles before it gets too late. This brings us to the end of my presentation. Your contribution, participation, or support are highly welcome. The next lecture is going to be about job creation to end poverty in Africa. Job creation to end poverty in Africa. Be sure you hit the subscribe button and give this video a like to show your support. Remember to update the bell notification option to stay up to date with the latest information on current events and African affairs that have a direct effect on our day-to-day living. Thank you for your time. God bless you.